Hey, fans of Intrepid, Eric Boehm here, the curator of aviation at the Intrepid Sea and Space Museum, coming to you from my little miniature aircraft factory, the basement of my home. And here for another little talk about airplanes. Have you been watching some of the things we've been putting up on this platform? I hope you're enjoying them. Last week we saw Kate and Peter from our aircraft restoration crew doing a little bit of work on the wing of Enterprise. So there's always fun stuff. There's going to be some presentations about the collection from Jessica and many other things from our educators. But I hope you enjoy these little airplane talks. And today I'd like to talk about our Grumman F11F Tiger. Now this airplane, I'm going to end up getting a little personal about this story. I'm going to show a little video at the end, and we'll have some more information in the video. And then, of course, always your questions. I really survive on those. So start typing in your questions. They're kind of looked at backstage, and then they feed them to me when appropriate. But I'll try to get to all your questions. And if not, we can always cover them later via email. But the F11F Tiger, when I arrived at Intrepid, in about 3 weeks, it's going to be 16 years ago. I can't believe it's been the most wonderful 16 years of my life, except for this last year when I haven't been able to be there. But what a wonderful thing to come onto this flight deck and see all these wonderful airplanes that I was put in charge of. And there was this airplane, the F11F Tiger, and it was painted like this. And here we see a Tiger on Intrepid. This is about 1957. That was the only deployment for the F-11Fs on Intrepid. They saw a very short service life with the fleet, but this is a VF-33 F-11F Tiger on deployment with Intrepid. It was Operation Strike Back. It was a NATO exercise in the North Atlantic with all the other NATO countries, and it was just one of the biggest NATO exercises to that date. But this is the way the F11F on Intrepid was painted when I arrived. And now, when I arrived, being the historian that I am, the first thing I did is I started digging into the histories of the airplanes I had. Now, I was, of course, interested in the airplanes. I was there to take care of the airplanes, but what always has fascinated me is the stories of the guys who flew them, worked on them, designed them, or just were around them in some way during their service life. And those were the guys I really wanted to find. And in order to do that, I really had to see what I had. So one of the things about airplanes, they have a very unique number on them. If you look at that airplane right there, it is not the number 210 on the nose. That is not unique to that airplane. That's more like a license plate. What I look for is the bureau number. It's a 6-digit number you can't see in this photo. It's underneath where it says Navy there. The last 4 digits of that 6-digit number up on the tail. But using that number, you can actually research an airplane and find its history. And I had a real hard time with the airplane on Intrepid. Get into the history cards, and when the Navy retires these airplanes, the history cards become the possession of the Smithsonian Institute, and they end up in some filing cabinet somewhere, maybe put on microfiche. I don't know how they're doing it. Hopefully they're storing them digitally. But I was able to, about 15 years ago, kind of access all the history cards on the airplanes that I had on Intrepid. And this one was a bit of a mystery. It shows when it was built, when it was delivered to the Navy, and it was almost immediately put into storage. We're talking about 1958 now. And then for some reason in 1960, it reappears. It gets about 9,000 or so hours, or 900 hours, I should say, of flying time on it. And then it's retired again at the end of 1963. And that was the extent of the information on the history card. Very sparse information. And this was kind of strange because the history cards usually tell me much more. For instance, I could the Skyhawk, the A4 Skyhawk that's in our possession, it showed every squadron it was assigned to. It showed how many times it was catapulted off of an aircraft carrier. It showed every aircraft carrier it was assigned to. It showed how many times it trapped or landed on an aircraft carrier. These numbers were actually counted and put on the history card. This airplane had none of that. Built, stored, taken out of storage, flown for a few years, and put back in storage. And it was just a mystery to me for a long time. And then something happened. Somebody said, you know what? Have you ever thought of the Blue Angels? And I did not. And so it was a little bit of research and a quick call I found a historian for the Blue Angels. They have a reunion website. There's somebody there with a whole lot of knowledge and a whole lot of records. And he was able to look at my bureau number and say that the airplane on Intrepid was indeed Blue Angel from 1961, 62, and 1963, all three show seasons. And it happened to be airplane number 5, not shown in this picture, because number 5 was the first solo position. And I remember asking the man, that's all very interesting, but man, do you know who flew it? And he said, I actually do. And he looked in the records and we came up with Lieutenant Lou Chatham. Lou Chatham flew this exact airplane that we have on our deck as Blue Angel number 5, all 3 of those show seasons, which is kind of rare because sometimes the guys move around at the different positions. Sometimes the pilots only spend about 2 years with the Blues before they move on and get back to their career in the fleet. And but Lou was with the Blues for 3 years, all 3 years as a solo pilot, all 3 years in this airplane. And I told you I was going to get a little personal with this story, and I'll get to that in a second. What was really fascinating about meeting Lou, I called him on the phone, and he called me, I should say, because they wouldn't release his phone number to me, and I understand he has privacy. But I said, please give Lieutenant Chatham my phone numbers. I gave him home number, cell number, work number. He called me at home that night. And when I answered the phone, he said, this is Admiral Lou Chatham. I heard you have my airplane. And I was just, I just hit the floor because, first of all, I didn't realize he was an admiral. I should have looked him up and, to see what his career turned into. And I had not gotten around to doing that at the time. And, but Lou was an admiral, and he actually flew during the Vietnam War. But what a great conversation I had with Lou. He went on and on. Not only was this his favorite type of airplane, but this exact airplane was his favorite one. He said, I did things in that airplane that you're not supposed to do. It always brought me home, but it always kind of spoke to me and said, don't do that ever again. So Lou just had these marvelous stories, and I'm still in contact with Lou on occasion. I've emailed him a couple times over the years, and he's still alive and well, and really appreciates that we have this Blue Angel number 5 on our deck. And here we are. This is 2011. So we're going back 10 years already. And that's me presenting a chunk of original wood flight deck from the original deck on Intrepid to Lou. I actually did a special program called Meet the Pilots. We had 5 pilots come out that flew airplanes that are in our collection. One of them was Lou. I flew him out from his home out west and hosted him in New York City for a few days. Gave him and his wife a hotel room and dinner a few times. But he was just marvelous. And he stood out in front of that airplane with that sign you see next to him. And it was a Saturday afternoon, a beautiful day, and we were just very crowded. Hopefully we will be once again this summer when things get back to normal. But they just crowded around him like he was a rock star, and he enjoyed every single second of that, talking about it. And you'll notice on the airplane, right underneath the canopy where it says Lieutenant Lou Chatham, that was not there until he arrived in person, and we applied that decal while he was there. So it's just so much fun meeting Lou Chatham. And I'll go back to the airplane again and tell you a little bit of the personal story about this thing. So it didn't really even dawn on me until after meeting Lou and after he had went home. And I realized that, and I had to go back into some old family photos, but my dad, we lived in New Jersey, and he took me to an air show in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, the Naval Air Station Willow Grove, which is just north of Philadelphia. And it was about, I don't know, maybe an hour drive from our home. And we used to go to the air show there. And we went, and I looked at the slides, and they're all dated 1963. And there's photos of the Blue Angels flying that my dad took. And I have a distinct memory of being on his shoulders, sitting on his shoulders. And at the time, don't do the math, but at the time I was 4 going on 5 years old. And it's one of my earlier memories of seeing these jets trailing smoke. and just being marveled by the whole thing, and then passing overhead. And I remember leaning back, and luckily my dad caught my knees, or I would have fell right off the back and cracked my skull. But he was able to catch me because I was sitting on his shoulders. But I remember seeing the Blues, and who would know that from 1963 all the way to 2011, I would meet the man that was flying in one of those jets. And so coming to Intrepid all, for 16 years ago, and then finding one of the jets that inspired me as a child to want to do something with airplanes. And even though I was never able to become a pilot because my eyesight is so bad, I did become an airplane mechanic and a historian about airplanes. And airplanes have been my life. And Lou had a piece of that. Is his fault. And so having that story come full circle has been really fun. And I like telling that story, the personal story. I'm going to play this short video for you. This is a video I made pre-pandemic, so you'll see that I have short hair and not the current ponytail I'm sporting now. Until I get both my shots, I'm not going to go to the barbershop. But take a look at this. Hi, my name is Eric Boehm, Curator of Aviation here at the Intrepid Sea and Space Museum. And today we're going to take a look at one of the more distinctive jets in our collection, the Grumman F11F Tiger. The F11F Tiger was a swept-wing supersonic carrier-based fighter jet developed for the U.S. Navy in the mid-1950s. Tiger production was short-lived, however. Only 201 examples were built between 1954 and 1958. Newer designs with superior performance made the Tiger almost immediately obsolete as a frontline fighter. During a Tiger test flight in September of 1956, a Grumman pilot shot himself down. After a test firing of the onboard cannons while in a shallow dive, the projectiles obviously slowed down, yet the aircraft accelerated, catching up to his own cannon fire, damaging the plane. The pilot survived the ensuing emergency landing. By 1959, Tigers began to be relegated to training and reserve squadrons. The Tiger's fuselage implemented an aerodynamic principle called the area rule, perfected by an engineer named Richard Whitcomb. The pinched waist shape of the fuselage made the airplane narrower in the middle and wider forward and aft. The Tiger also had a very thin wing for high speeds, something modern fighters still have today. The wing incorporated full-span leading-edge slats, as well as full-span trailing-edge flaps for slow speed, something essential for landing on aircraft carriers. And something more novel, for roll control instead of ailerons, the airplane incorporated almost full-span spoilers. The Tiger's operational life as a frontline fighter was brief, just a few years. They were flown from Intrepid in 1959 and in 1960. The Tiger's usefulness continued in another way. The Navy's flight demonstration team, better known as the Blue Angels, flew Tigers for the 12 air show seasons between 1957 and 1968. The airplane on display here at Intrepid actually served as Blue Angel number 5 from 1961 through the 1963 air show seasons. It was flown by just one pilot during this time, Lieutenant Lou Chatham. Chatham went on to fly combat during the Vietnam War, served 31 years in the Navy, and reached the rank of Rear Admiral. Well, due to our research and the documentation we found, we are 100% sure that this airplane was Blue Angel number 5 in the 1961, 62, and 63 show seasons. But it's kind of fun to find the physical evidence that even proves it even more. And that was found right here. And what you're looking at is an oil pipe. The ammo can was replaced with an oil tank and a pump. Whenever the Blue Angels were flying and you see that distinctive smoke trail, that's oil being pumped down the line directly into the afterburner to be ignited and turned into smoke. What we were able to see, that though the tube was missing, all the mounts were still in place. So during the last refurbishment of this airplane, we fabricated and installed a replica smoke tube. The F11F Tiger may not have had a long frontline career, but its service distinction and training, and with the Blue Angels, make this one very important aircraft for our collection. For more behind-the-scenes videos, visit intrepidmuseum.org. Yeah, so I just love that video. And to elaborate a little bit more, I always found it fascinating that that pipe, it's such a crude installation. It's just running down the side, and there's little clamps holding it. And what we found was the fasteners that were embedded in the skin, all in the right place. And there was places where that little pipe would wiggle vibrate, I guess, and it just you would see a little bit of a mark where the pipe actually went right into the metal. And so it was just fascinating to see that. I mentioned that Admiral Chatham told me about things. He did things in that airplane that the airplane brought him home, but said, don't do that again. And one of them was that formation takeoff. And you could see in that video, there was a 4-ship formation takeoff, and the slot pilot immediately sucks in behind number 1 right off the ground. If the runways were wide enough, this is back in the early 60s, if the runways were wide enough, the number 5 and 6 airplanes, the solo pilots, would also go abreast with the formation, and they would take off, and they would immediately go into their 6-ship diamond formation while they were still coming off the runway. Something that Admiral Chatham told me they would never allow that. They really didn't allow it then, but they did anything they wanted back then, it seems. But just fascinating story from Lou. And his Vietnam stories had my hair on the back of my head just sticking up, because it was just, he had so many things to say, and this program would just take hours and hours. And I hope that someday I'll bring Lou back to New York City. We'll have him back for a program. He's still with us and healthy and ready to go and ready to talk. So we just need to get the pandemic over and get things back to normal. I also mentioned in that video the wing construction. You can actually see with the wing fold there how thin that wing is. And I talked to a Grumman engineer. I said, how did you make that? Because I'm an aircraft structures guy, and I understood big airplanes. I worked on C-5 Galaxies, and I understood how that wing was built. You can actually get inside the wing and stand up in most places. That's how big that was. But that thin little wing, he said, it was actually machined from planks of aluminum, and grooves were cut in it for lightning, and then the 2 halves were put together. And I just thought that was just an amazing thing. What I want to do is I want to take some time for questions. So we have any? We're popping up right here. This aircraft arrived with some mystery behind its origins. Is that unusual for aircraft at Intrepid? No, not unusual, because the airplanes, they really don't come with a story unless you go looking for it. On occasion, we know the story before it comes. We're going to do a program on our Skyray, which we don't have yet. But it's a story. It's an airplane that's up in Connecticut. We're going to move down, and I know all about it, and the story is going to be well known before the airplane even arrives. But when I arrived, there just seemed to be no stories attached to the airplanes, and every single one of them has a story. And it's been fascinating to uncover these mysteries and then find the guys that are attached to them. Next question. Oh, I know this person. This is my daughter. You can't hide your name. That's my daughter who lives up in Salem, Massachusetts. Love you, baby. How did Navy pilots become Blue Angel demo pilots? Was that a competitive, desired gig for pilots? I asked that question, and I've gotten different answers. Yes, it's a very, very high level thing. You're going to be out in the public. You're going to be one of the famous guys. I mean, I remember going, even as an adult, going to air shows and getting their autographs on the program. So the Blue Angels, very highly prestigious job. You are the best of the best, but these are fleet pilots. They're not really using skills that are any more special than they already know, but they're very fine-tuned. Their formations are a lot tighter. They say they're the best of the best, but I would argue to say that all naval aviators are capable of performing as a Blue Angel. So I imagine it's very competitive to get the gig. Next question. Thank you, Karen. What military conflicts did the Tiger serve in? No conflicts. It was in that little niche area. I mentioned that in the video that they only had a very short lifespan with the fleet. And that was actually serving as a fighter jet on aircraft carriers on cruises. And that was only about 3-year span. When they were finally retired out of that, they had that long life with the Blue Angels, but they also served as advanced training jets. And that's why a lot of the jets you see on display, they only made about 200 of these things. And there may be, I'd have to check, but I bet you there wouldn't be more than 20 or 25 of them left in one piece that are on display in museums. And a lot of them are either painted as Blue Angels, because they were, or they're painted in an orange and white paint scheme of the training squadrons that use these things. Now, there was no two-seat versions, so you were a competent jet pilot when you got to ride training in a Tiger. You would learn advanced maneuvers and things like that, but it's a single-seat jet. So you had to know what you're doing before you got in it, but they had a very long life in the training command as well. Do the Blue Angels still fly this particular aircraft? No, 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 no. So they flew the Tigers up until about 1967 or 68. That was the end of that. And they actually went into a big new airplane, the F4 Phantom, which was huge. And both the Thunderbirds in the Air Force and the Blue Angels simultaneously took on the Phantom. The Phantoms were kind of cycling out of the Vietnam conflict, and some of the airframes that were used during the Vietnam War were modified for air show work because airplanes get tired. They're made out of metal, you get metal fatigue, and there is definitely a service life to airplanes. So actually serving in one of these air show squadrons is a lot less strenuous than carrying thousands of pounds of munitions and bombs. But the F4 Phantoms were twin engine. They sucked a lot of fuel. They were very big airplanes. The maneuvers they were able to make were quite remarkable, but they took a lot more space. So they only used the Phantom for a couple of years, and then both the services, the Air Force went to the T-38, which was a smaller, much more fuel-efficient jet, and the Navy went to the A4 Skyhawk. Eventually, the Navy went from Skyhawks for several years, and then they started flying the F-18s, the F-18As in particular, and some of the B model two-seaters. And it's only this year that they're getting away from those older F-18s and the Hornet, the F-18 Hornets, and now they're going to be transitioning for this coming year into F-18 Super Hornets. And look it up. It's a bigger airplane, more powerful, more capable, and it's going to be an awesome air show season with the Blues this year. Got another question here. Hey, Jim, how you doing? Jim's another good friend who's works at Intrepid, and it's great to see you. Can't wait to see you in person, buddy. Hey, Eric, great program. Can you quickly go over that aircraft used for the Blue Angels throughout history? Thanks. I think I just did that. But let's go before the Tiger. And we got to go all the way back to post-World War II. And when World War II ended, there was these air show teams that were kind of forming themselves. It really wasn't official. And then there was the official Blues. And they started off with an old World War II workhorse, the F6F Hellcat. They were painted, they've always been painted blue with yellow lettering, and they actually had a Hellcat back in the day that they used. I'm not sure the exact use of it. I remember reading about this. They had one painted in reverse. It was all yellow with blue letters, and they called it Beetle Bomb. I think they flew it on ahead of the team to get to the air show site, make sure everything was ready for the team to arrive. But Beetle Bomb was a yellow painted F6F, really pretty. From that, they finally got, they actually, briefly used F8F Bearcats, which were built too late for World War II to see service in World War II, but were a very hot piston engine airplane before the jets took over. And then they used Panthers, straight wing Grumman Panther jets, and that's the F9F. And then the F9F-8, the Cougars were the swept wing versions. And then onto Tiger. There was also a brief time there where the Blue Angels used in their solo performances the F7U. You're going to have to look that one up. I don't have a picture ready to show you on that. And from what I've read, the Navy kind of forced the Blue Angels to kind of showcase the Cutlass because it wasn't a very popular airplane with pilots. They were having a lot of gestation problems getting this thing into the fleet. At one point, it was called the Ensign Eliminator. It needed a lot of finesse to fly. It was in capable hands, a remarkable airplane. But the Cutlass was a flying wing, actually, with twin tails. Really beautiful jet. Look it up, the F7U Cutlass. I think I covered all the history. The other airplane that there was cargo airplanes that wore Blue Angel colors too. I'd have to research that a little better. More famously would be in more recent years, the C-130 cargo airplane, four turboprop engines, and they would sometimes take that thing out to the air shows, and as an extra added bonus, they would strap on the JATO bottles, the the rocket assist takeoff bottles, which make a whole lot of smoke and noise and get that airplane off the ground almost instantly. And you see a C-130, a 4-engine cargo airplane, climbing almost vertically straight up with all this smoke coming off the JATO bottles was quite a remarkable thing. I never saw that in person. I've only seen films of it, but that's something else you can Google. We got one more question. How often do you get to meet the pilots who once flew aircraft in your collection? Believe it or not, more often than not, and that's what makes my job so wonderful. So early on, you know, I had that idea for Meet the Pilots, and there were certain pilots I really, really wanted to find. That first Meet the Pilots program back in 2011, I had Lou. I also had an Avenger pilot. I had a Skyhawk pilot who flew our Skyhawk off Intrepid over Hanoi. I also had an A-12 pilot, and I had an F3, the FJ3 Fury that we have on display. I had a Marine pilot that flew that. So I had to learn my lesson though, putting all the one, and I had moderating the program. The F-16 pilot, we have an F-16 Air Force F-16 on display on the deck, and I have the pilot who was from the New York Air Guard, lives in upstate New York. I brought him down. He flew that airplane over Baghdad on the first day of Desert Storm. So I had all these pilots on a panel. And if you can imagine 2 microphones with all these pilots and the audience, I had 250 Boy Scouts in the audience, and they were wonderful. And they raised their hands with great questions. But when the pilots wanted to answer, everybody grabbed for the mics, and these guys actually had a fight over it. So I learned my lesson about putting too many fighter pilot egos on one stage at one time. I don't think I'll ever do more than 2. The Meet the Pilots that came after that was during Women's History Month, and I had only women pilots. I had a Navy pilot. I had an Air Force pilot. I had one of the original WASPs. Her name was Bee Haydu. She lives here in New Jersey, and she was a WASP back in World War II, and she actually taught guys how to fly. And then the other pilot I had was a jet blue captain, and she was actually running their simulator program at the time, and she was kind of marvelous because I filled the audience up with Girl Scouts this time, and they just really zeroed in on her. They appreciated all the history I had up there, but they zeroed in on her because she was a mom and a JetBlue airplane pilot and seemed to be living 2 lives there and making it all work, and so she was a fascinating person to work with. So I want to do more of those Meet the Pilot programs. But we got to get things back to normal first. Hey, that's all the questions, all the time I have questions for. We're going to wrap it up. If you have any more questions, please, send us a note. You go to intrepidmuseum.org. There's a way to contact us there. And if you have a question directly for me, it finds me, believe it or not, within a day. They channel them to me. And we've got a lot more of these airplanes to talk about. I'm going to do a few more of these programs while this pandemic's going on from my little airplane workshop. I hope you tune in more and check out our website. Once again, intrepidmuseum.org for all the wonderful programming that we're going to do live right here. Thanks. See you next time.